It's 2:37 a.m., and something is standing outside Laura's cottage. I can hear it dragging its nails down the wood siding, slow and deliberate, like it knows I'm inside. The porch light flickers once, then goes completely black. I grip the list of rules tighter, my eyes scanning for the one that might save me. But the paper feels warm now, like it's breathing. Rule number 4 says never open the curtains after midnight. But the whisper at the window is saying my name over and over in my own voice. I don't know if I should follow the rules, or if they've been leading me here all along. Asterisk, the first thing you should know about Laura's cottage is that it doesn't look haunted. In fact, it's the kind of place people book because it looks too perfect, a restored 19th century farmhouse with whitewashed siding, ivy climbing the porch posts, and a big rocking chair out front. The kind of place that photographs like a painting and makes you think about drinking sweet tea while cicadas hum in the distance. The kind of place that hides its teeth that I didn't plan on being a caretaker for an Airbnb in rural Georgia. Hell, I didn't even plan on staying in Georgia longer than a week. I'd been driving south, half looking for work, half running from a breakup, when my gas gauge dipped toward empty and I took the first exit I saw. The sign for Hollow Creek, Pop 682, barely caught the headlights before it vanished. In the dark, the gas station was closed, but the diner across the street was open, one of those chrome and neon relics that seemed frozen in time. That's where I met Laura. She was sitting alone in a booth with a mug of coffee, watching the rain slick the street. Her hair was tied back, but a few strands curled loose, framing her face in a way that made her seem older than she probably was. When the waitress brought my food, Laura just slid into the seat across from me like we were old friends. "You're not from here," she said. It wasn't a question. "Nope," I said through a mouthful of burger. "Just passing through." She smiled a little, like she knew something I didn't. "You looking for work?" I hesitated. "Not really." Her smile didn't falter. "I've got a place I need someone to watch for a while. I can pay in cash, room and board included." That's how it started. No interview, no paperwork, just a handshake and an address, scribbled on the back of a napkin. The next morning, I drove out to the property. The town fell away quickly, replaced by rolling hills, blackwater creeks, and trees so dense they seemed to lean in toward the road. Laura's cottage sat at the end of a gravel lane, the woods pressing in on all sides. The air smelled of damp, leaves and something sweeter. Honeysuckle, maybe, but heavier, cloying. Laura met me on the porch with a ring of keys and a yellowed envelope. "This is everything you need," she said. "Keys for the main doors, pantry, shed out back. Instructions are inside." "Instructions?" I asked. Her smile was quick and tight. "Just read them and follow them. You'll do fine." She didn't linger. She didn't give me a tour. By the time I'd stepped inside and turned around, her car was already gone, the sound of the engine swallowed by the trees. The inside of the cottage smelled faintly of cedar and old books. Hardwood floors creaked under my boots. The living room was cozy enough. Brick fireplace, shelves lined with knickknacks and framed photos. But the photos were strange. They weren't family portraits. No smiling vacation shots. Just pictures of the house itself, taken at different times of day and from odd angles. One was of the front porch at dusk. Another was of the kitchen with the lights off. In one, the curtains in the upstairs window were drawn back, just enough to suggest someone had been looking out. The envelope sat heavy in my hand. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I wandered through the rooms. The kitchen was spotless. The fridge stocked with basics: eggs, milk, bread, all with expiration dates weeks in the future. Upstairs, there were 3 bedrooms. One had been stripped bare except for a single wooden chair facing the wall. Another had a quilted bedspread and lace curtains, like a guest room. The third, my room, I decided, was plain but comfortable, with a desk under the window and a wardrobe big enough to crawl inside. By late afternoon, the rain started again. I made coffee, sat at the desk, and finally opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded twice. The handwriting was neat, careful. At the top, in bold letters, it said, "Rules for caretaking, Laura's cottage," but the page didn't list any rules. Just one line. "These will be delivered to you when it's time." I stared at the paper for a long time. The rain pattered against the window, a steady, hypnotic rhythm. Somewhere in the trees, something screamed, not an animal I recognized. The sound cut off abruptly, as if someone had pressed a mute button on the world that I told myself it was nothing. Just a fox, maybe, or an owl. But when I checked the clock, it was 8:13 p.m., and I had the sudden, irrational feeling that I was late for something. That night, I lay in bed, listening to the house. The wind moved through the trees outside, but inside the air was still. Every so often, the floorboards would pop softly, like the house was adjusting itself. I tried to sleep, but sometime after midnight, I woke to the faint sound of footsteps above me that I was on the top floor. The steps moved slowly, pacing back and forth, then stopped directly over my bed. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. After a long moment, they started again, softer this time, until they faded into nothing. The next morning, I found the second envelope. It was on the kitchen counter, though I was sure it hadn't been. There when I'd gone to be ED to in the same careful handwriting. It read, "Rule 1 will be delivered tonight. Be ready." The morning after finding that second envelope, the air in the cottage felt different. I couldn't put my finger on it. Maybe it was the way the sunlight came in through the kitchen window, dust motes hanging like suspended ash. Maybe it was the silence, a silence that didn't feel empty, but waiting. I made coffee, trying to shake off the unease. Outside, the woods were wet from last night's rain, glistening in the early light. A low mist clung to the tree line. The gravel drive was empty. No sign of Laura, no sign of anyone that I'd half convinced myself that the footsteps I'd heard were just the house settling. Old wood, weird acoustics. That's all. But that didn't explain the envelope that I checked the locks. The front door was bolted. The back door, too. All the windows were latched from the inside. No signs of forced entry that I decided to keep busy. The job, after all, was to watch the place, and I figured that meant keeping it clean and presentable for guests. Not that there were any. Laura hadn't said if she was expecting anyone, and there was no online calendar in sight. But I dusted the shelves, vacuumed the rugs, wiped down the counters in the living room. I noticed one of the framed photos had shifted. Just slightly, maybe a quarter inch to the left. It was the one showing the porch at dusk. The same photo I'd looked at yesterday. I straightened it without thinking, but as soon as I stepped back, something about the picture made my stomach knot. In the far left corner of the image, barely visible in the shadows, there was a shape. Not clear enough to identify, but tall, leaning against the porch post, watching the photographer, watching from exactly where I'd seen Laura standing when she handed me the keys. That I told myself it had to be a trick of the light, a smudge on the lens. The day passed uneventfully. I made lunch, explored the shed out back, nothing but garden tools and a covered lawnmower, and sat on the porch for a while, listening to the woods. Every so often, I'd hear something move in the underbrush, too heavy to be a bird, too light to be a deer. Around dusk, the air cooled sharply, like someone had opened a door to a cellar. The shadows stretched long across the yard. I found myself glancing toward the tree line more often, scanning between the trunks. That's when I noticed it. A break in the trees, maybe 20 yards deep, where the mist seemed thicker. It wasn't just mist, though. It pulsed, slow and steady, like the breath of something enormous. That I went inside before full dark. Dinner was quiet. I left the dishes in the sink, too restless to care. I kept checking the clock, waiting without wanting to admit I was waiting. At 11:47 p.m., I heard the first knock. It wasn't on the front door or the back. It came from upstairs, a slow, deliberate knock on the wall above my bed. 3 times, then silence that I didn't move. My heart was thudding so loud I could hear it in my ears. At exactly midnight, I heard footsteps in the hall. Not fast, not hurried, just a steady walk toward my room. The floorboards groaned. I sat up, gripping the blanket. "Who's there?" My voice cracked. No answer. The steps stopped outside my door. For a moment, I thought I saw the doorknob turn, just the slightest twitch, before it stilled again. A sound slid under the door then, soft and dry, like paper being pushed across the floor. That I forced myself to get up, legs shaking, and opened the door. The hall was empty, but on the floor, just inside the threshold, was a third envelope. That I took it back to bed, sat under the lamp, and opened it with hands that didn't feel steady. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The same careful handwriting. Rule 1. After midnight, do not open the curtains in the living room. No matter what you hear, that was it. No explanation. That I set the paper on the nightstand and lay back, staring at the ceiling. Somewhere in the house, A door I hadn't touched creaked open. Asterisk, I didn't sleep much after Rule 1. Every time the house creaked, I pictured the living room curtains, heavy, floral patterned things, shifting just enough for something to look in. The thought of what might be on the other side made my skin crawl. The next day was gray and humid. Thunder rolled somewhere far off, the kind that rattles your teeth and makes the air feel charged. I kept myself busy again, sweeping the porch, checking the pantry, trying to ignore the way the woods seemed to press closer. Around noon, I saw something move past the upstairs window. Not fast, not a blur, just the slow shadow of someone walking. But I'd been outside all morning, and the doors were still locked that I told myself not to go up there. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table and waited. At exactly 5 p.m., the air in the room shifted. Not colder, not warmer, just different, like when a storm breaks and you feel the pressure drop. That's when I noticed the envelope on the table. I swear to you, it wasn't there a second earlier. This one was thicker. Inside were multiple sheets of paper, all neatly stacked. Across the top page, the heading read, Rules for Caretaking, Laura's Cottage, and then, in that same precise handwriting, they began frowny face slow, deliberate tone Rule 1. After midnight, do not open the curtains in the living room. No matter what you hear. Rule 2. If you find any of the framed photographs turned slightly to the left, straighten them immediately. Do not look at them for more than 3 seconds afterward. Rule 3. The upstairs bedroom with the single wooden chair is not to be entered after sundown. If the door is open in the morning, close it without looking inside. Rule 4. Between 2 o'clock and 3:15 a.m., you may hear footsteps on the roof. Do not investigate. Do not acknowledge them. Rule 5. If you wake to the smell of honeysuckle, leave the house and wait on the porch until it fades. Under no circumstances should you follow the scent. Rule 6. On the nights when it rains, you must light the oil lamp in the hallway before going to bed. If the lamp is already lit when you go to light it, blow it out immediately and stay awake until sunrise. Rule 7. There is a cellar door beneath the rug in the pantry. You are not to open it for any reason. If you find it open, leave the cottage and do not return until morning. Rule 8. Occasionally, you will hear someone knock at the front door after dark. If you look through the peephole and see yourself standing outside, do not let them in. Rule 9. If the phone in the upstairs hall rings, you must answer it before the 4th ring. The voice on the other end will try to convince you to break a rule. Hang up immediately. Rule 10. Never, under any circumstances, touch the rocking chair on the porch after midnight. If it's moving, let it move. If it stops, leave it alone. Rule 11. At sunrise, open the curtains in the living room before doing anything else. Failure to do so will make the rest of the rules irrelevant. That I read them all twice, my pulse hammering in my ears. There were no explanations, no reasons why, just commands, each more bizarre than the last. By the time I reached the end of the stack, I realized the house was quiet in a way that wasn't natural. No ticking of the clock, no distant rustle of trees, just stillness, like the air itself was holding its breath. That night, the rain came early. Heavy, steady sheets that blurred the trees and made the roof groan. I remembered Rule 6 and lit the oil lamp in the hallway before bed. The small, steady flame was oddly comforting, but when I passed the hallway an hour later, the lamp was already lit. And I hadn't touched it. That I stood there for a long moment, staring at it, the rules crumpled in my hand. Then I blew it out and stayed awake until sunrise. The morning after blowing out the lamp, I stepped out onto the porch to a sky that didn't look right. The sun was up, but the light had a thin, metallic quality, like it was filtered through water. The air was damp, cold enough to bite the inside of my nose. Something was sitting in the rocking chair, not someone. Something. It was a bundle of cloth, tied tightly with twine, about the size of a child. My first thought was that Laura had left some supplies, maybe wrapped in a tarp. But the longer I looked, the more I realized the fabric was wet. And it wasn't from rain. It was seeping. I backed inside, shut the door, and locked it. Rule 10 echoed in my mind. Never, under any circumstances, touch the rocking chair on the porch after midnight. But it was well after sunrise now. Did that mean it was safe? Did the rules stop counting when the day began? I didn't test it. I went about my chores, keeping my eyes away from the front windows. By afternoon, the rocking chair was empty. The bundle of cloth was gone. The only sign it had been there at all was a faint red smear on the armrest, like someone had trailed their fingers along it. That night, I made a decision. I was going to follow every rule to the letter. No hesitation. No mistakes. The first test came just after midnight that I was in the kitchen, making tea to keep myself awake, when I heard it, a faint, deliberate sliding sound, like fabric brushing against wood. It came from the living room. Rule 1. Do not open the curtains after midnight. But I didn't need to. I was close enough to see their outline. They were swaying slightly, as if something on the other side was brushing against them. And then, a whisper that it wasn't words at first. Just a low, rhythmic sound, almost like breathing. Then it formed syllables. Come see. It wasn't a voice I recognized. But there was something wrong about it. A doubling, like two people speaking. The same words a fraction of a second apart. I stayed frozen in the kitchen until the sound faded. My tea went cold in my hand. 2 nights later, Rule 5 was tested. I woke in the dark, groggy and disoriented, to the thick, cloying scent of honeysuckle. It was so strong it made my eyes water. The rule said to go to the porch until it faded, so I did. But when I opened the front door, the scent intensified. It wasn't just in the air, it was moving, curling out of the woods in pale ribbons. I could almost see that it pulled at me. Not physically, but in a way that made my feet want to move. To follow, I gripped the porch railing so hard my knuckles ached. The scent shifted, sweetened, turned almost intoxicating. Somewhere in the mist beyond the tree line, I heard my name. I don't remember going back inside. The first outright breach happened the following week. It was 3 a.m. when the phone rang. Not my cell, the old rotary phone in the upstairs hall. Rule 9. Answer before the fourth ring. I ran for it, catching it on the third. The voice was my mother's, except it wasn't. Sweetheart, it said, in that perfect imitation of her tone. You sound tired. Why don't you open the curtains and let in a little light? Just for a second. I slammed the phone down. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. And then the knocking started. 3 slow knocks at the front door. When I checked the peephole, my own face was staring back at me. But it wasn't smiling. It was grinning. Asterisk, I didn't sleep after the night I saw myself at the door. The grin stuck in my mind. Too wide, too many teeth. Like it had been practicing the expression but never quite got it right. The rules had been clear, do not let them in. But it hadn't tried the doorknob, hadn't spoken, hadn't moved. Just stood there in the dark, wearing my face, until the sky began to pale with morning. By the time the sun was up, it was gone. I thought maybe things would quiet down if I doubled my efforts, followed every instruction to the letter. But by now, it was obvious something in this place wanted me to fail. The first push came 2 nights later, during one of the storms. Rule 6. On rainy nights, light the oil lamp before bed. If it's already lit, blow it out and stay awake until sunrise. That night, I lit the lamp as soon as the rain started. I watched it for a while. The flame steady, the glass chimney fogging slightly from the heat. I must have dozed off on the couch, because when I opened my eyes again, it was 2:07 a.m. and the lamp was gone. Not moved, gone. Just an empty space on the hallway table where it had been. And in its place, a candle. It was already burning. The flame wasn't the warm orange of firelight. It was deep red, like the last glow of a dying ember. The shadows it threw didn't match the furniture. They bent in wrong directions, stretching toward me instead of away. I blew it out instantly. The smoke smelled like hot metal. And then, from somewhere deep under the floorboards, something sighed. The second push came the very next night. Rule 3. Do not enter the upstairs bedroom with the wooden chair after sundown. If the door is open in the morning, close it without looking inside. I never went near that room. But when I woke up at 6:12 a.m., the door was wide open. I told myself I'd just close it and be done with it. But when I stepped into the hallway, I heard a faint tapping sound coming from inside. I kept my eyes low, fixed on the door frame, and reached for the knob. The tapping stopped. Something breathed directly into my ear. I slammed the door and ran back to my room, refusing to look behind me. By the end of the week, it was constant. Little tricks, little slips. The framed photographs, Rule 2, would turn themselves to the left when I wasn't looking. The smell of honeysuckle, Rule 5, would drift in through the vents even on windless nights. One night, I found the cellar door in the pantry, Rule 7, standing wide open, the rug neatly folded beside it. From the darkness below, a slow scraping sound rose up, like something being dragged along stone that I didn't go near it. I left the house entirely and sat in my truck until dawn. But the worst breach came on the night the rules themselves changed. It was just past midnight. I was pacing the living room, keeping my back to the curtains, when I noticed the envelope on the coffee table. Inside was a single page, but the handwriting wasn't Laura's careful, neat style. It was jagged, messy, as if written in a hurry. The page listed the same 11 rules, except 2 of them were different. Rule 1 no longer said, "Do not open the curtains." It said, Rule 1, open the curtains immediately at midnight. Look outside until you are told to stop. And Rule 8, the one about seeing myself at the door, now read, Rule 8. If you see yourself at the door, let them in before sunrise. The ink was still wet that I didn't touch the paper. I didn't move, but from behind the curtains, something tapped on the glass. Once, twice, then my voice said, "It's time." The tapping didn't stop for hours. It was measured, deliberate, and patient, as though whoever, or whatever, stood outside had no need to rush. The sound had wormed its way into my skull until I began to imagine it wasn't coming from the glass at all, but from inside my own head. Each tap another knock against the inside of my skull. I sat frozen in the middle of the living room, the air around me thick and too warm, gripping the 2 lists of rules, the original and the altered one, switching my gaze between them as the words seemed to shimmer and shift in the low light. The old rules told me not to open the curtains, not to let myself in, but the new rules demanded the opposite, and I didn't know anymore which set belonged to Laura and which belonged to the thing pretending to be me. The clock above the mantel ticked toward midnight, and the moment the minute hand hit 12, the curtains parted without me touching them. They didn't just slide back, they moved in a sudden, almost angry jerk, like unseen hands yanked them open. Beyond the glass, the forest didn't look like the same forest I'd walked past 100 times. The trees leaned in toward the cottage, their branches tangled like fingers interlocking, trapping the place in. No wind stirred them, no leaves moved, yet I could hear something rustling deep inside, far off but coming closer. Then I saw it. Me. But not the grinning version from before, and not the pale, hollow-eyed one either. This time it looked exactly like I do now, right down to the trembling in its hands, the smudge of dirt on the left knee of my jeans, the faint scar above my eyebrow. It stood in the moonlight and mouthed words I couldn't hear but could understand. "Let me in." I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the coffee table, and realized the furniture had moved again. The couch now blocked the hallway. The table had shifted to wedge itself against the front door. The house was steering me. The tapping at the window turned to scratching, then to a slow drag of nails that went on until it sank into the bones of my teeth. Upstairs, the phone began to ring. My stomach dropped. It had been silent for weeks, and every time it rang, something happened. It would stop after 4 rings, and if I didn't answer, the consequences had always been worse than whatever waited on the line. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my breath loud in my ears. The ringing cut off on the 3rd tone as I snatched the receiver. For a long, suffocating moment, there was nothing, just a low static hum, like breathing through a wall. Then, very faintly, my own voice whispered, "You're in my place." All the lights in the cottage snapped off at once. I stood in the dark, my eyes straining, my ears working overtime, and then I heard it, the slow, wet sound of footsteps on the porch. Stairs. Something stepped onto the landing outside the front door. The hinges groaned. The door didn't slam or burst. It opened in one long, aching creak, as if savoring the sound. Then, footsteps again, inside this time, making their way toward the stairs. I couldn't make myself move. The boards below me complained with every step it took, each one slower and heavier than the last. When the weight shifted onto the top step, the doorknob to my bedroom turned. I knew what I was going to see before it happened. It was me, just me, breathing the same as I was, eyes locked on mine, holding a piece of paper in one hand. The original rules. Except there was only one now. Rule 1. There can only be one caretaker. My double stepped into the room. I backed away until I hit the far wall, but there was nowhere left to go. Its breath was cold on my face as it placed its hand, my hand, on my shoulder. The paper crumpled between its fingers as it leaned closer, and I understood with absolute. I see clarity that I wasn't going to be the one staying here anymore. The last thing I felt before the darkness took me was the pull, like being yanked through my own skin, and the sensation of something sliding neatly into place where I had been standing.